Welcome to Fresh Off the Boat. This is Ed Brand's podcast series where we interview students who've graduated from college or are attending grad school or even PhD programs. So today, I'm delighted to be with Janvi Venkatraman, a student I've known since she was in high school, and now she's almost completing her PhD at UCLA, and she will be talking about all her life journey while she was preparing for college and also then her current job in geophysics. So why don't you introduce yourself, Janvi, and we'll take it from there.
Sure, yeah. So thanks so much for having me. I am currently, as you said, in graduate school. Whether I'll be close to finishing soon, I don't know. But I'm a third year PhD student in planetary science. So that's in the Earth Planetary Space Sciences Department at UCLA. Um, and I currently study the surface of the moon and Mars, a little bit of Mercury, looking at ice, but taking sort of a statistics approach to it, which was my undergrad focus also at UCLA. I took a few years of a gap in between to work at a consulting company, so I have some experience with that. But that's we can delve into that a little deeper in this conversation.
There was a time almost a decade ago when I was visiting Caltech, and I'd met the admissions officer. In a pretty casual conversation, then he had mentioned that that's great that students from India apply in hordes to tier one schools and highly selective schools. And he was a bit like, then he said, I want to share a tip with you. And he said, why not, ask your students to go beyond the usual engineering, computer science, and apply for some of these school majors where we are looking for students. And he mentioned geophysics and all the great work they were doing in planetary sciences. So, and I'm talking to you now. So it's really cool to sort of go back around that memory lane and sort of share this with everyone. What was it
Yeah.
like? What was your journey like? How did you end up being where you are, academically speaking? Sort of, how did UCLA prepare you for what you're doing now? And what is the road to that? How did you decide things along the way? And of course, the first job at Booz Allen and then here. So it's a long, long question. Go over, take it.
Yeah, it's been a long, long journey. So I sort of fell into it as I think most geophysics and geology and planetary science majors do, which is fortunate and unfortunate. I think this field really wants, as you said, for people to come join and contribute to the science that we're doing because it's not something that's small at all. I think it's definitely in the public eye and is a very rewarding work. So we definitely need people to come contribute to the field, but I don't think it's something that's made available to students before undergrad, especially. Um, and definitely not in India from my experience. But once you start pursuing graduate studies, is when I think both India and the US um, start introducing students to these possibilities of specializing in geophysics. So the way that I sort of came into it was I wanted to do BusyCon, as you know, and I applied to UCLA undeclared because I still wasn't set on BusyCon. And when I got here, I was PCM economics in school, and I decided, maybe I'll try my hand at psychology. Maybe this is something I might be interested in. And I sort of wanted a break from the physics. But I quickly realized that I think I needed the physics and the math, and I missed it so much that I sort of picked statistics just out of necessity almost. It was like it's employable. It's something I can do that isn't too physics heavy, but isn't too far away from all of the STEM that I want in my major. So I ended up doing that, but then everybody was going into business and finance and statistics, and so I really tried to pick up some research on the side because I quickly found myself again gravitating back towards the physics department. And one of the classes actually that I took in undergrad, this was my third year, I met my current advisor, and he offered this research position to me as an undergrad, and that's sort of how I got introduced to the whole thing. And smaller departments like geophysics and space physics, I find are really good about reaching out to students like this and taking them in for research opportunities, especially at an R1 institution like UCLA, which is I think one of the big things that I realized once I got this opportunity. But then I still, wasn't sure whether it was something I wanted to pursue in graduate school. So I applied for consulting positions, and I got actually a consulting position that was very closely related to geophysics and space physics, where I was looking at GPS testing at Booz Allen, and sort of curating a data pipeline for their GPS testing data. And it was good in the sense that the people were really nice and the pay was obviously really good. And some people I think would have really enjoyed that, but I really missed the research, and like so many others during COVID, I had sort of a quarter life crisis, and I came back to India for 6 months, and I applied to grad school. Decided that that was really what I wanted to do, and if I didn't, um, get into grad school, then I sort of would have to reconsider, I think, my options. But luckily, I got in, and I'm I've been here for 3 years now, and I'm so happy with my decision. It's just it's everything that I'd hoped it would be. So yeah. It is challenging, but happy to be here.
So you also studied statistics at school, at college, and then a bit of data science kind of seeps in, I guess. So you are aware of the latest tools and data analytics and now AI and all of that. So all the sciences are using, for lack of a better word, the buzz around is AI and everything. So, how would you define AI in the field that you are in, and how did it really help you sort of go ahead in terms of doing the research that you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think because at least more recently, the size of the data sets that we have in space are expanding so rapidly. It's opening up the possibility for, I guess, what we colloquially term as AI, or artificial intelligence or machine learning, whatever you want to call it. Um, because there are so many menial tasks, I think, that can be very quickly automated in our field. So something simple like crater counting, which is impact craters that are sort of spattered all across these surfaces of various planetary bodies, are numerous, and often really hard to pin down and count and say. It takes from weeks to months to count all of them and record all of them. So something like AI would be really useful if it can sort of look at images of craters that we've already identified, and then you let it loose on the entire surface of the moon, for example, and it does a really good job of identifying what it thinks is a crater. So it's typically used mostly for automation as of now in this field, but people are definitely getting very ambitious with what they think AI is capable of. And something I really would like to do is apply it to more of the signal processing and spectroscopy side of lunar science, which is a specific type of instrumentation that we have, and hopefully be able to unleash the machine learning on some of the spectrums that we're not able to identify as well or as clearly.
So one of your area of research while I was going over your resume was study of the surface of the moon and elements and material. So how does that really work? And there's so many fascinating aspects of eventually using that kind of matter, the combination and compounds and whatever else, for use on our planet, and sort of duplicating those kind of compounds and using them. So where is give us a sort of a fascinating view of the future. What all can we use from the Mars or other planetary sort of objects?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of so much online now with people being like, when is space travel going to be a thing and accessible for the public, and when can we live on Mars and all of that. So, right now, I would say I don't really know how close we are to, I guess, creating a colony on any of these planets or harnessing the resources. Right now, we're still sort of in the process of fully understanding what resources are actually available to us and how much of those resources, and sort of what the exact locations and depths of these resources are that we can actually tap into. So a small example, I guess, would be, water on the moon, which is what I study. Um, it's we know that there is ice, and we know sort of where it's located, which is near the poles of the moon, but it's very difficult to send landers to the moon for various reasons, and there have been many who have succeeded and many who have failed, but specifically we haven't really tapped into the potential of the far side of the moon. Chandrayaan tried, and then shut down after a while. So, I think we're still in that sort of trial and error phase of figuring out how we can harness all these resources. So I would say we're quite far away. And, I'm very much of the opinion that improving our planet, I think, is sort of a better approach to this whole, global warming situation and ultimate, I guess, apocalypse, or however you want to look at it, as opposed to settling Mars or the moon.
That's a good, wise take on this. Suppose you study the thermal properties of the surface and certain materials like regolith, and then obviously there's a lot of information on how those materials can be used for insulation or this and that. So does that fascinate you, or is there a different field of study and people focus on material sciences in a very different way? Or is it kind of when your department sort of looks at everything related to space and planetary sciences?
I see. So if I get your question correctly, is it sort of what facets of planetary science does our department sort of
And also
cover, I guess?
materials, and also the materials we can study on different planetary systems or even the moon, and then see how they can be used on planet Earth. So is that something in the future?
Yeah, in the future, perhaps. I mean, that sort of, I think, goes into my previous response where, so we do focus on materials, various materials on the moon and Mars, but not so much how to harness them for use on Earth. Mostly because it's, that sort of transport of materials from the moon and Mars is very difficult. And we're actually trying um, to, there's this thing called Mars sample return, which is basically returning the samples that we have collected in the Mars 2020 rover and return them back to Earth. But, so far it's proving to be quite a difficult challenge. And we've already experienced numerous budget cuts. And and I think the government is realizing that it's a much bigger challenge than sort of we had set out to undertake.
Great. So now let's focus and switch gears on, how does one get to where you are headed, like completing a PhD in a few years? What was the preparation required, not just in your field, but in general for say, a college student who's interested in academic research to keep in mind while preparing a journey of academic life for a pretty long time? So yeah, go over your journey and let us know what students should do to prepare.
Yeah, so I think first is knowing that this is something you definitely want to do. And, it was, as I said, a long journey for me also. But if, there's any doubt in the student's mind that this is maybe something they don't want to pursue, it's going to make it 10 times harder to stay in this program and stick with it for, the 5 or 6 years that you'll be doing this. And it at times can be very frustrating. It can be very self-driven. So, you have to really love what you do and the process of doing it in order to really, I think, be successful. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you, know for sure that this is really where your head is at and you want to pursue a PhD or pursue, a career in academia, I would say the biggest thing is getting research experience. Research experience and, getting your name on abstracts and presenting at conferences. Possibly, if you can, get your name on a paper that is published, not necessarily by you as first author, but you just sort of did data collection for a graduate student who then published a paper, and you're already miles ahead of a lot of applicants who are interested in graduate school. So yeah, that would be, I think, the biggest tip. And your references also make a huge difference. So definitely making connections with people who are well established in the field that you're interested in undergrad is a huge plus. And honestly, depending on the program, grades don't even factor in that much. It really is communication with the people that you're interested in working with and the type of research that you've already done.
Tips for high school kids. If you're looking for making a long list of colleges you're considering to apply to, There's always that itch to research. However, very few students end up doing detailed research while they're in high school. Broadly, they go by whims and fancies or whatever they've been hearing or what their parents want them to consider as their final list. However, one should look at various parameters, and one of them is size of the university. So there are large public universities in the US, and then there are mid-sized private universities, and then there are smaller liberal arts colleges which only have undergrad students. And there are pros and cons for each. However, there are many more parameters. So personality of the student body could be something, the location, the setting goes to sort of really give you a sense of the cluster you'll be in terms of even while when you graduate, what kind of jobs and opportunities and industries are around. But beyond just looking at jobs, this is 4 years of your life. So looking at a place you can call home for 4 years. Will you be happy in that city location or a rural setting and things like that? So that's a lot to digest for a 17-year-old making a list. And today we have a guest who's been there, done that. And you did choose a large public university. UCLA does get that. A few love, a few hate, and a few are there, love to hate and hate to love. So tell me a little bit about your high school mindset. What tips would you want to share? What went wrong in your college research, and what worked out eventually?
Yeah, so I, as a 17-year-old, and it feels like it was so long ago, exactly as you said, you really don't know. Um, it's so much to consider for a 17-year-old to consider location and academics and sort of, am I going to be happy there, job opportunities. And so I think with Ed Brand, made a good sort of 50-50 list of large public universities and private universities, or smaller institutions, uh, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. I was, planning to apply undeclared everywhere of the econ, just because it was what I thought would be good. Um, and it sort of just worked out that I went to UCLA, to be completely honest, because it was one of the top schools that I got into. And I didn't really do a lot of research in terms of, whether or not I would be happy there, whether or not I think there was not a lot of choice in my situation. So I decided to go with the large, big name university. So and looking back, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do that, but it did work out that I went to UCLA because it worked out well for me. Even though it was a big university, I found that there was a lot of diversity at UCLA, and that was one thing that I really, really wanted. Um, Another thing that UCLA offers is, of course, the beautiful campus. So, like, the weather is lovely, and I'm not someone who does well in cold, gloomy weather. So that really was a plus. And then people also have really diverse interests, I feel, at UCLA. So there was a lot of space for me to join clubs that weren't academically inclined. And I really needed that because for me, de-stressing was playing my instrument or dancing or singing. Or even trying different cuisines with friends, being able to access Indian food easily. So there were just so many factors that I think ended up working out, and I loved UCLA so much that I ended up staying and really being happy with that decision. But if I'm being completely honest, it just worked out like that. It wasn't any research that I had done beforehand. So I really don't blame any 17-year-old who makes a decision and then regrets it because how can you have all the information at that age? You can't. Um, but unfortunately, that's the best answer I can give.
Thanks. I think it's pretty insightful, and there's always that serendipity in place, right? And also having that accepting nature to sort of make it happen, make it work. So yeah, that's fantastic. But do share life hacks, Gyan, like things that students could do, international students planning to study abroad, sort of could keep in mind, and your sort of mindset philosophy, anything that goes as a few words before we close.
So I think I would say at least the personal mantra that I've sort of lived by is, life is so short. So I have really tried to enjoy my journey as much as possible wherever it's taken me. Um, I think, I missed home a lot. And the grass is always greener on the other side, I think. So, there are times then when I go home and I spend 6 months at home and I really miss the US. So I think just, in whatever you do, put your heart and soul into it, and really try to find space for things that you enjoy in life. I think that would be my sort of vague, but something I actually do try to live by.
So thank you, Janvi. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up after so many years. And maybe in a few years again, we'll bump in online or in person to take this conversation forward. Take care and see
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, I really hope so. It was great talking to you.
Likewise.